Stop planting peppers like tomatoes. That one mistake is exactly why your bell peppers stay small, stall out, or drop their flowers before anything useful happens. I see it constantly. People bury pepper stems deep, overwater early, and push nitrogen like they're growing leafy greens. The result is soft growth, weak roots, and plants that look healthy but refuse to produce big, thick fruit. What actually grows large bell peppers is controlled stress early on, followed by very deliberate feeding and watering once the plant flips into fruiting mode. If you get that transition right, the plant shifts from surviving to producing, and that's when the size shows up. Let's start with what happens before the plant even goes into the ground, because this is where most of the damage is already done. The way you handle seedlings determines how big your peppers can ever get. If your seedlings are leggy, root-bound, or constantly wet, you've already limited your yield. Bell peppers need a strong, compact start. When I'm growing seedlings, I keep them slightly on the drier side compared to tomatoes. Not bone dry, but definitely not constantly moist. That small bit of stress forces the roots to search and thicken instead of sitting shallow and lazy. When they're ready to transplant, I want a dense root ball that holds together when I slide it out of the pot. If it falls apart, it's too early. If it's circling aggressively, it's too late. That middle ground is where the plant transitions best and avoids that stall period that kills early production. And here's where most people go wrong immediately after that. Planting peppers deeper does more harm than good. Peppers are not tomatoes. They do not benefit from being buried deep. When you plant a pepper stem below soil level, it doesn't magically grow more roots. It often just sits there and risks rot, especially in heavier soils or raised beds that retain moisture. I plant peppers at the exact same depth they were in their container. Sometimes I'll even go a little higher if the soil is dense. Then I firm the soil just enough to remove air pockets without compacting it. That balance really matters because, honestly, peppers hate suffocation at the roots. In a raised bed, I aim for a soil mix that drains quickly but still holds enough moisture so you're not out there watering all the time. A good working blend is about 40% compost, 40% coarse material like cocoa coir or aged bark, and 20% native soil or a mineral component. That gives you structure, airflow, and nutrient holding capacity without turning the bed into a soggy sponge. And before the plant even goes in, the planting hole itself matters more than people think. What you put in the planting hole decides your fruit size later. Forget dumping a handful of random fertilizer and hoping for the best. What peppers need early is phosphorus for root establishment and calcium for structural strength. If you miss that window, you'll end up chasing problems all season. I mix a small handful of bone meal or a low-nitrogen organic blend into the planting hole, along with a source of calcium like crushed eggshell powder or gypsum. Not chunks, powder. It needs to be available early, not months later. In hydroponic systems, this is even more precise. Your starting solution should lean slightly higher in phosphorus, with an EC around 1.2 to 1.5 for young plants. Push it higher too early and you'll get fast growth with weak structure, which leads to poor fruit set later. Once the plant is in the ground, this is where most gardeners lose control. Overwatering early kills root strength. Right after transplanting, people panic and water too often. That's the fastest way to create shallow, dependent roots. Instead, water deeply once, then let the top few centimeters of soil dry before watering again. In warm climates, that might mean watering every 2 to 3 days instead of daily. The goal is to encourage roots to chase moisture downward. That's what builds the kind of plant that can support large fruit later without collapsing or stalling. In containers, the same rule applies but tighter. You water thoroughly until runoff, then wait until the container feels noticeably lighter before watering again. Not just slightly dry, actually lighter. That weight difference is one of the most reliable indicators you can use. And once the plant settles in, everything shifts. This is where you switch from growing leaves to growing peppers. Around the time your plant starts forming buds, you need to change how you feed it. Too much nitrogen at this stage gives you big leafy plants with very few peppers. This is where most people get fooled. The plant looks amazing, but it's not producing. I cut back nitrogen and increase potassium and calcium. A simple way to do this in soil is to top dress with a balanced organic fertilizer that leans toward fruiting, something like a 5-10-10 ratio, and water it in deeply. In hydroponics, I'll shift the nutrient solution to an EC of around 1.8 to 2.2 with a stronger emphasis on potassium. That's what drives fruit development and size. If you keep feeding like it's still in the vegetative stage, you'll never get those thick-walled peppers. And this is also where the simple trick comes in, the one that consistently makes the biggest difference. Consistent deep watering is what actually sizes up your peppers. Not more water, consistent water. There's a difference. Bell peppers size up during the fruit expansion phase, and that process depends heavily on stable moisture levels. If your watering is inconsistent, the plant slows down or aborts fruit altogether. What works best is a deep watering method where you fully saturate the root zone, then allow a partial dryback before repeating. In a raised bed, that means watering until the soil is moist at least 20 to 25 centimeters deep. Then you wait until the top layer dries out again before repeating. If you keep it constantly wet, you suffocate the roots. If you let it dry too much, the plant goes into survival mode. That middle rhythm is where the magic happens. In hydroponics, this translates to stable reservoir levels and avoiding big swings in EC or pH. Keep your pH between 5.8 and 6.3, and don't let nutrient concentration fluctuate wildly. Stability is what allows the plant to focus on fruit size instead of stress response. Now let's deal with one of the most frustrating problems. Blossom end rot is not a calcium deficiency, it's a water management problem. People rush to add more calcium when they see blossom end rot, but most of the time, the calcium is already in the soil. The plant just can't move it properly because watering is inconsistent. Calcium moves with water inside the plant. If your watering is erratic, calcium delivery gets interrupted, and you see that black, sunken spot on the bottom of the fruit. Fix the watering first. Make it consistent. Then make sure you're not overloading with nitrogen, which competes with calcium uptake. In most cases, that alone stops the problem from spreading. And now we get into the part that really pushes production higher. A cheap feeding trick that dramatically increases fruit production. You don't need expensive fertilizers to boost pepper production. One of the most effective methods I've tested is a simple liquid feed made from compost or well-aged manure. Take a bucket, fill it about 1/3 with compost, then top it up with water. Let it sit for 24 to 48 hours. Stir it occasionally, then dilute it about 1 to 3 with water before applying. What this does is provide a broad spectrum of nutrients along with beneficial microbes that improve nutrient uptake. I apply this every 10 to 14 days once the plant is actively fruiting. In hydroponics, you obviously can't use compost tea directly, but you can mimic the effect by ensuring your micronutrient profile is complete and stable. That includes magnesium, iron, and trace elements that often get overlooked but play a big role in fruit development. And one more thing most people ignore completely. You need to manage how many peppers the plant is trying to grow. If your goal is big bell peppers, you can't let the plant overload itself early. When the first flush of flowers appears, I often remove a few of them, especially on smaller plants. That redirects energy into root and stem development. Later, when the plant is stronger, you let it carry more fruit. The result is fewer but significantly larger peppers instead of a bunch of small ones that never fully develop. It's a trade-off, and it's one worth making if size is your goal. At the end of the day, growing big bell peppers isn't about doing more. It's about doing the right things at the right time. Strong roots early, controlled feeding, consistent watering, and managing plant stress. Get those 4 things right, and the size takes care of itself. If you found this useful, subscribe to Gardening Simplified. This is exactly what we focus on. Real techniques that actually improve your harvest, not just make your garden look good. And if you know someone struggling with small peppers, share this with them. It might be the difference between another disappointing season and a harvest that actually delivers.